Hello and welcome in this section about creating a simple map that we can use to test our main logic, our main game mechanic, which will be the shooting mechanic. For now, when we press play in our project, we will have a simple walk mechanic that so our avatar can move around using the input from the player, so the WASD or arrows, and we can rotate our player towards our pointer. And all of this we will use in a bit to create a shooting mechanic. But to test everything, we would like to have a simple map, a small room for example, that we will be able to use for testing purposes. So I have figured out that we may want to first create the style map so we have some prettier view to look at in our game window rather than this blue screen. So let's stop the game. And first of all, first thing that we will need to do is go to our project section and underscore sprites folder. And here we can see that underscore sprites underscore map contains some tiles that are for a dungeon map. Now, for some reason, the sprite mode is single. I have already prepared those sprites, so let's simply change the single to multiple. Let's apply, and we can click this sprite editor to make sure that each and every tile is split. Now, if you have such a tile map and you want to split your tile map, what you can do is click the slice button here, and what we can do now is choose the type to grid by cell size. I happen to know all the cells are 16 by 16, and we want to delete the existing sprites. And for the pivot, we can leave it at the center. Let's slice it, and you can see that the empty parts of the image are ignored. The sprite editor only gets the images that contains something, so those borders are not selected, but all of those sprites are now selectable. So we have pre-created our setup, and you can see that everything looks great. So we have created our setup. Let's apply it, and we are good to go. So if you have this kind of tile map for your own game, now you know how you can quickly split it up into separate cells. So our graphics is prepared, but now, how do we use tile maps in Unity? Well, usually you would like to go to Window, 2D, but there is only our sprite editor and sprite packer. So what we can do is click inside our hierarchy, choose 2D, and here we have our tile map and different kinds of tile maps. But to add our tiles to our tile map, we will need to download a package from the package manager. So what we will need to do is go to top menu, window, and choose the package manager. Great. And what we want to search for is tile map. And you should have a single package that is ready to download. This is from Unity Technology, so this is free. And you should have the 2D tile map editor. If you do not have it, you can click here in the top left corner of package manager and make sure that you have chosen the Unity registry. So now, when you have found this package, simply click install, and let's wait a bit until it is installed. Great! When you are done, let's close the package manager. And now what we can do is go to the top menu, window, 2D, and here is our tile palette. So let's click it. A new window should appear, something like this. I am going to dock it here in where my hierarchy is, but you can leave it floating around, or you can dock it anywhere that you want. So we are almost done. What we want to do now is choose our hierarchy, and here let's right click, create a 2D object, and let's choose our tile map. So this will add to our game a grid object that contains a grid and a tile map that is the tile map where you are going to paint on. Now if you take a look at the documentation, you can read a bit more about this, but basically it tells us the same steps. So we need tile palette to place our tiles on the tile map, and to create a new tile map we simply create a 2D object of type tile map, and we have our component of type tile map that has some presets that you can use to create a tile map that you would like to have. And below here we have the tile map workflow. So generally we want to create a tile map, we want to drag our sprites into our tile palette beforehand creating a tile palette, and then we want to use our tile assets, which will be automatically created from our sprites, and paint them onto our tile map. And optionally, we can attach tile map collider 2D, and I'm going to show you everything else about it. And there is an extra section on GitHub for our tile maps, which contains some interesting scripts that allows us to, for example, animate our tile map, our tile, or create a tile that can be randomized, so we can randomize the assets in it. Now we may want to explore it in a further section of this course, but for now we are not going to bother with those extras from the 2D tile map section of Unity. Okay, let's get back to our project. So as I have mentioned beforehand, we are going to want to open our tile map, and here we have our create new palette button. And since you can see that create a new palette in drop down above, so let's click the drop down and let's name our palette our dungeon. It is rectangle, the cell size will be automatic. So let's click create, and you will have a folder to be chosen for the storage of our tile maps. So let's go to our assets, and I'm going to right click, create a new folder, and I'm going to call it _tiles. Enter, and I'm going to select this folder for creation of our tile palette. Now we have our folder here added to our project, and what we want to do with the tile palette window opened, we want to go to our sprites. We want to select our sprites map. We can extend it using this arrow here. Let's select all the tiles. Using shift you can select all of those. Holding shift and clicking to the last one of those, you can select all of those, and we can drag them into our tile palette that we have created. Again, we are prompted with where should we save it, so I don't want it to be saved in the sprites. I'm going to save it in the assets, since this creates tile map asset from Unity instead of using those sprites. That's why I want to keep it in the separate folder. I'm going to choose our _tiles. I'm going to right click, create a new folder called tiles or tile assets. Okay, and I'm going to create a dungeon assets. And here in this folder, I will save the tile map assets created by Unity. Great. So upon finishing, you should see in your tile palette window the tiles that we have created, and you can select one of those, and you can see that we are painting it on our tile map. So this is the here in the active tile map, you can select the tile map. So maybe we are going to tackle what is going on in the next video and how we create the tile map, but basically you can see that there are different buttons, and you should have the brush selected, and now you can place the tile on your tile map. And let's tackle on those tools and how to create your tile map for the floor in the next video. So see you there. In the previous video, we have prepared our tile palette that we can use to draw our tiles on our map. What we want to do now is we want to make sure that we have in our hierarchy a tile map prepared to paint our floor on. Now let's select our tile map, and first of all let's change the name of it to floor. And one important thing about tile maps is that if we try painting on it, so just to show you, and I want to change it, the tile will replace our element. So if we have a wall here and I want to add a top to it, I will replace our floor. So the issue that we have is that we only have a single tile map. So what we want to do instead is we want to left click on the grid and create a couple of tile maps that will hold separate sprites on it, separate tiles, so that we can set up our game so that our player will sometimes appear in front of a wall when the wall is at the top, and sometimes behind the wall when the wall is on the bottom, since this is the perspective that we are going for. So let's right click on the grid and choose 2D and add a tile map, and let's rename this tile map to wall back, and let's Ctrl D actually on it to copy it, change the name, F2 to change the name, wall front. Okay, and we will also want to have another one of those, so Ctrl D, and change the name to collisions. Great. So those will be our tile maps. And let's focus on the floor for now. So as I have previously mentioned, let me explain what we can actually do with our tile map. So we can see our window. I'm going to expand it a bit. Actually, I can maximize it. And what we can see here is that this is our tile palette that contains tiles. And what we can do here is we can edit it using this edit window and use the tools that are above to erase or add another one of those, or maybe even move a single tile using this move. So the second icon M, we can move it somewhere else if we do not like the setup. So we can organize it a bit. So we have floors, for example, here. So we can use the short keys S to select and M to move. And we can select all the tiles and move them using M. So switching between S and M, we can move those around. And we can see here that this is some kind of a hole in the floor. So we can maybe move those around. So give it a shot. Try moving those floor elements so we can have all of those in one place so we can paint them more easily. But for now, that's it for the tile palette. I'm going to minimize this tile palette and drag it somewhere and dock it maybe in the hierarchy, so I have more space to show you what is going on inside our tile map in our scene. So we have those different options that we have used in the edit mode, but what we can do is we can use those to select our tiles on the tile map inside our game. And again, S is for selecting. We can move our tiles, so we can select again using S and move it using M. But we can also use brush, so this is the third icon B, to select one of those tiles for the floor and paint this using this brush. So we can see that our tile is painted where we are touching the tile map with our mouse pointer and holding the left mouse button. Another useful tool is the fourth tool. It is called Paint a Filled Box. So we can use U to select it, and we can paint a whole tile map here. And now we can see an issue. So our player is now invisible. So what is going on? We are going to fix it in a bit. Let's finish off with our tiles. So we have our pick tile, so we can place a different tile here and use this I to select this, and now B to select brush, or actually it automatically chooses the brush and paint it. And again, we can choose I and select the floor, and we are in the brush tool, so we can paint floors here. So we can easily use I key or this pick tool to select a certain tile on our map and copy it or quickly duplicate it. Next tool is the eraser. So this is D, and we can erase the tiles that we have painted. And here is our player. And the last tool is float fill, and we can fill the gaps inside our tile palette. So those are pretty useful tools that we can use. And you can see that our active tile map is currently the floor. Now if we select another one, so in my case this will be the wall back. And now let's select, for example, this tile that contains only this bottom part. And we can choose the brush tool to paint it. And we can see now that our wall element is painted on top of the floor. So this is why we have created multiple tile maps, so that we can paint tiles on top of another one. And now what we can do is create our desired setup. Now make sure you always check on which tile map you are painting it, since if we go to the hierarchy and select our wall and disable this object, now we can see that our wall elements are on the wall back tile map, while on the floor are only floor tiles. So we have our floor. Let me paint a bit more using this tool for the painting as a rectangle. Great. And this could be our map for this section. But still we have the issue that our player is underneath our tile map. So what is going on? Well, this is the issue with our tile map render and a sprite render for the player. So you can see that in the additional settings we have sorting layer, which currently is default for the tile map, for the floor and wall back. Let me turn on the wall back. And again, for the player, if we expand our player and choose the avatar and our sprite render, again, this is sorting layer default. So this means that every layer, so every tile map and the player are all painted on the same rendering layer or sorting layer. So this means that there is by chance the tile map on top of the player, but this is only because I think we have painted the tile map later. So let's fix this issue in the next video. See you there. In the previous video, we have created our tile map, but unfortunately our player has disappeared. So what we can do about this? In Unity there is something called sorting order. Let's take a look at the documentation. So you can see that every renderer has sorting order, and renders order within a sorting layer. You can group game objects into layers in their sprite render component, and then we can use this sprite order to prioritize which game object should be sorted first and which should be sorted second. And that's basically it for the sorting order. Let's go back to Unity. Great. And we can see that if we choose our player avatar, and we can see that we have sprite render, which is a render. And we can see that in the additional settings we have our order. And since we have only default, we do not have an option to change it. So let's click this add sorting layer. And then the tags and layers menu will be opened. You can access it using this top right corner of Unity layers and edit layers. And you can go to the same menu. And now here we have our sorting layers. So let's click this plus icon and let's add a sorting layer. Let's call it floor. Next, let's click again, and what we can do is click background, elements. Next, we can add layer or foreground. Okay, yeah, let's add a player as well. And let's drag it before. We can drag layers using holding the left mouse button and dragging it around. Or we can maybe call it agents. So the idea behind it is that the floor will be underneath everything, the background elements might be on the floor, the agents will be drawn before the elements or in front of them, so we will be able maybe to step on those. And I will explain more about this in the future video, and the foreground elements will always be rendered in front of the player. So let's go back to our player, choose the avatar in the hierarchy, and let's choose an avatar sorting order. Let's choose the layer as the agent. And now you can see that our agent is rendered in front of the floor. So we can go to the grid. Let's maybe double tap on it or F2 and call it map. And on our map, we will choose our floor and let's set its rendering order, sorting order as the floor. And you can see that there, now it is in front of the wall back. So let's choose the wall back. And let's choose, we can choose background elements. So this will always be rendered in front of the floor. And now wall front will, let's change the default sorting order to foreground. So it will always be in front of our player. And collisions, we do not care about collisions because we are going to turn off the tile map renderer for it soon enough. For now, that will be it. So we can maybe test it. And let's go to our tile palette and let's choose as the active tile map, let's choose the wall front. Let's choose a wall tile, choose the brush, and let's paint such a wall at the bottom of our floor. And let's press play now. And keep in mind that we do not have a camera, so you might want to see it in the scene view. I'm going to move downwards, and you can see that our player is being hidden behind this wall. So this is what's going on with the sorting order, but we are always rendered in front of anything that is in our sorting layers. So let's click layers in the top right corner, edit layers. So every layer that is below will be rendered in front of those that are above those layers. So agent is rendered in front of the floor and in front of the background elements. and foreground elements are rendered before everything else. Okay, so this is all about sorting order that we will need to know. So in the next video, we will create some walls around our map and add collisions to it. So see you in the next video. In the previous video, we have fixed the issue with the sorting order. Now, let's create some walls around our map so that we will have kind of a test ground that we will use to implement our shooting mechanic and our enemies before we can expand this map and maybe create something more. For now, let's focus on implementing the walls. So what we are going to do is, first of all, let's go to our tile palette window and make sure you choose the eraser, and let's choose walls. Actually, I think we have walls back, this strange drawing, so I'm going to remove it. And what we will want to do is we want to make sure that our wall back will be the walls that are on the top of our map, so that we can show our player in front of those walls. So I'm going to choose one of those walls from the tile map. Of course, you can choose another one. I think this one with the ending of half a brick is at this end, and another one of those will be fitting the other end, and the middle one should fit as the default wall in the middle of those. So as I have shown you before, we can use this U tool to create a line of those, because if you are painting with the brush, whenever you move your mouse a bit, it will go in the wrong direction. Great. And now what we can do as well is we can add some sides of this, and we can see that we have the sides of the wall here. And what we can do is what I was talking about earlier, we can place it on top of our floor and it will still be visible. So again, I'm using this tool for painting a box, and I'm going to paint it on one side, and I'm going to use another one of those. And in addition, you can use the square bracket to rotate your tile around. The left square bracket, it will rotate to the left, so anti-clockwise, and right square bracket will rotate to the right. So you can use it to maybe a bit faster draw different cells, different tiles. Great, so we have our walls on the wall back tile map, and this will be this wall and the wall on the side. And of course we could place the wall on the side on the wall front tile map. It doesn't really matter for this, because we are not going to move through those, because we are going to place colliders on those. Great, so now what is left is to place corners on our wall. So you can see that now we can't really place those on our wall. But what we can do is we can choose our wall front and now use the square brackets to rotate those endings. And I don't think it will fit here, so I'm going to use the side wall and add it one of those to one side and another to the other side. And now it fits correctly. And I'm going to add the bottom ones, and we have again a couple of those in our project. So I'm going to add one of them on one side and another one with the half a brick on the right side to the right side. And now I can choose those wall tops to add this effect that this is a 3D wall. I'm using still the paint a filled box tool. Okay, and we can see that this doesn't really fit here, so I'm going to use the second sprite. And now it looks pretty good. So we have this 3D effect. And what we can do as well is paint those at the bottom when we have our wall front, because we are still working on the tile map wall front. And here we can see that we have an issue because we need to use those corners. And do remember that the side wall is painted on the wall back. So we can remove this using the eraser, and we can paint on wall front the corners. Let's select you can select the ones that you think fits here. Okay, and one is with this corner here, and one is a straight corner, so choose whichever you like. I'm going to use those with the rounded corner. and I'm going to use the top of the walls to paint here. And you can see that this doesn't really fit here. So I think this is on the other side. Let's see. Let's see which one will fit. Okay, I'm going to Ctrl Z to go back and remove what I have placed here. I think it will be good enough. So we are going to leave it like this. I don't think we have any other endings. Yeah, I think we do have. So let's see if any other of those will fit better. I think we can randomize those a bit, but let's not focus on it right now. So we have this enclosed space made out of walls, and this is great. I think this looks pretty good, but what else can we do? I think we could fix here this wall. I don't know if we have a nice wall here. I think we do. Oh yeah, this is it. So the endings that we have used at the top of our wall can be used here as well. And I can see that we have those walls with the fixed element with this white bricks that we can place here to make our corner rounded here as well. So what we can do is go to our wall back and place it here and choose the other one to add this rounding here. Now this might be not very important, but if you plan to add some details to our game, this might be useful. And I can see that we again have the issue with the setup here, that we have on our wall front painted the side walls, and now I have used eraser to erase those, so now we can see this rounded corner here, and I think we can choose another one of those to paint it on top of it. So as you can see, there are a lot of quirks with placing those tiles depending on the tileset that you are using, but this looks good enough. So in the next video, what we are going to do is we are going to add some colliders to our walls, because right now, if we choose the select tool so we are not placing any more tiles here, press play, we will not be able to collide with our walls, so our player will be able to exit through those walls. And on top of that, our player is shown correctly at the top of this, and since the second element is placed on the wall front, it is rendered before our player. So we are going to place a collider here, so we cannot really go further than something like this, because we have a collider on our feet, and that's why we have placed it in our player move collider. Let's edit it, you can see here. So when we are going to collide with our wall here, the wall will have collider of its own, and we are not going to be able to cross it, and our player will be nicely rendered in front of this wall in the back. Okay, great, but now in the next video, let's finish it off with some colliders. So see you in the next video. In the previous video, we have added some walls to our tile map. Now, what we would like to do is add some collisions to it. So how do we go about it? Well, let's start from going into the tile map, selecting the active tile map as the collisions, and let's choose the wall prefab or wall tile. Let's choose the paint a filled box tool, and let's paint those walls here. What we can do now is to go to the hierarchy, and let's choose the collisions tile map, and make sure that you have in your scene view the gizmos turned on, because now what we are going to do is we are going to add to this component a tile map collider 2D. And you can see that our walls now are treated as separate colliders. Because we want to treat them as a single collider, even for just the efficiency of our tile map, what we will want to do is make sure that we add to our tile map collider used by composite. So we want to check this box. We will get the error now. So what we will need to do is add, let's type composite, and we should have composite collider 2D. Let's add to it, composite collider, and now we can see in our scene view that our collider is just a single collider instead of the separate colliders. But in addition to that, our collisions tile map has received a rigid body 2D. And unfortunately, when we press play now, our collider will start falling down, and you can see that it has stopped on our player. Now this isn't very good, so let's stop it, and instead we are going to mark this rigid body 2D as being static, since this collider will never move. So what we are going to do is Now we can go back to our tile palette and let's choose a active tile map. Let's make sure that this is the collision tile map. Let's choose one of those side walls, and of course we can swap the tile map renderer for our collision layer, so collision tile map. So let's select it, let's choose our renderer, and let's set it maybe sorting layer to foreground. Let's add 10 to it so that we see what we have placed here. Let's go to our tile palette, and what we are going to do is select one of those side elements and choose the paint a filled box tool, and let's paint those on the sides of this wall tile map, and we can use the square bracket to rotate it, and let's place it on the other side as well. Great, so it has added those small collisions, and what we can do is slide down, and again we can add something like the wall and place it so we will not be able to hide behind this wall. So let's add it, and now this is the solid element, so we cannot go underneath it, or we can use the something like this side element or top element, and instead place it here, and we will see that now we will be able to go down here. Now we would need to add those sides. It all depends on what you want to achieve. Now if we leave it like this, the collision tile map will be rendered in front. So what we want to do now, since we have this closed collider, so we will not be able to exit this area, let's go to the hierarchy. Beforehand, let's select the select area tool so we are not placing any more tiles. Let's go to the hierarchy, let's choose the collisions game object, and let's disable the tile renderer. And now we have our collisions layer. That's why we have created this tile map, the separate tile map, so we can disable it, and if we want to modify it, we can select it, or we can simply take a look at the gizmos and see what is going on. Now, by the way, if you have placed some additional tiles somewhere, so let's choose the brush and let's place some tiles here, we can see that here is some unwanted collider. What we can do is choose our eraser, hold Control, and we can have the selection area for the eraser a lot bigger, and we can delete some of the bigger elements here. We need to again hold Control to decrease the size of it. But in any case, it might be sometimes useful to delete the bigger area that you want to delete. So now what is left is let's choose the selection tool, go to the hierarchy, let's press play, and let's see if we can collide with our walls. Now if we move, we are colliding with our walls. In the scene view you can see it better, and now you can see that we are colliding with those walls. Let's go to the bottom in the scene view, and you can see that our character is now hidden behind this wall. So this might be not the best approach for our map, since maybe our enemies will be hidden behind this wall, and when you go down, our enemy will attack you and you will not be able to hit it properly because you do not see it. So to fix it, let's stop it, and instead let's choose the collision tile map as the active tile map. Let's choose our floor, for example, and let's choose our paint a filled box, and let's paint here the solid collisions. Great. Now if we go to the selection tool, let's press play, and we go down, we can see that now we cannot really hide as much behind the wall. Okay, so that's it for adding the collisions to our map. In the next video, let's add a Cinemachine camera that will follow around our player so we can more easily see what is going on when we move our player. So see you in the next video.